Hey everyone, I am Ed Gutowski. I am your English 1C instructor, and I wanted to create kind of a welcome video that introduces you to class, talks about the textbooks for the course. And let me just tell you, you are in for a treat because this is the English 1C class that is just loads of fun. I am super excited about our online class. It's going to be a lot of fun. So the first thing you should know about English 1C is English 1C is a class that really focuses on one thing only. We focus on rhetoric and argument. So I guess in that sense it really focuses on two things. But English 1C, the rhetoric and argument part of class, is just loads of fun. I found that students, just in a ground class, you can get rolling. They love rhetoric and argument. But even as we shifted to going primarily online because of COVID, I've really been able to tailor the online classes so that same kind of energy, that same kind of passion comes in. And with this class in particular, I am jazzed about our reading because this is probably has the best reading that I think for any of the 1C classes I'm talking about or I'm teaching. So let me talk about the textbooks for classes. The first one, this is our textbook. It's called Everything's an Argument. I think I started using this textbook the semester before we went all online because of COVID, and just found that I had a really good success with it. Students like the ideas, it's accessible, and I think it really helps students understand the key concepts of rhetoric and argument. So the second book we're going to look at is the Siegel Reader Essays. You'll write 4 short papers based on some of the essays in there. Again, students like the readings in the Siegel Reader. The arguments are really interesting. And really, I can only say, believe it or not, the only thing I can say about this textbook is the number one criticism that I get about the textbook is we don't read it enough. I mean, students are pretty engaged by the readings and the selections I pick, so I end up kind of branching out and making sure, we read it enough. So, because there's some great articles to look in there. Now, the first book we're going to look at is a book called Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. And this is the book, again, I even taught it over summer school. Boy, it just strikes a chord with students. Students really like Into the Wild. Now, I've found that some students say they may have read it before. Some students have read it in high school. But even if you've read it before, what I think students, and I constantly get this, is that students like the approach that I take with Into the Wild. It's slightly different. Especially because we're going to be looking at it with regards to the rhetoric and the argument. So students really kind of appreciate if they read it before to kind of returning and re-examining some things. To give you some background, if you've never read Into the Wild, it's the true life story of a kid who's graduating from high school. He's going to college, and as he's going through college, he has these big questions. I think he's really asking himself, why am I going to college? What do I want to do for a job? And what do I want out of life? And I think these 3 questions are pretty universal. I think at some point or another we all cross that bridge and ask ourselves these questions. And so the main character does something that's really foolish. What he does is he graduates, he sells all his possessions, he gets rid of all of his money, and he had inherited some money from some of his grandparents, a pretty significant amount, gives it all to charity, and then disappears in the wild, and no one knows what happened to him. And you can imagine his parents are pretty freaked out. They hire a private detective to kind of find out what happened to their son. And 6 months later, this kid walks into Alaska with a pistol, 10 pounds of rice, and tries to live off the land and dies of starvation. And Jon Krakauer, as the author, wants to know what would motivate a kid who had everything going from him, coming from a well-to-do family, really smart, and why would he do something so foolish? And I sort of will start the book off, I'll imagine you guys are the private detectives who the parents hired, and as you're reading, you're going to kind of look for clues to see what would motivate the main character. Into the Wild it's almost like my Sega weapon. It's just like students love it. It raises great discussion points, and it's a lot of fun. And it's also kind of a quick and easy read. Then we're also going to read a book, Begin Again. Now, this is about James Baldwin, and Baldwin has really become very popular in the last 5 or 10 years ago. He's one of the great African-American writers of the last half of the 20th century, and even though he died in 1987, the last, I'd say, it's really since Ferguson, there's been kind of this really rejuvenated interest in Baldwin, so it'll allow us to look at issues of race and races in America And again, I've had students reading Baldwin. There's an article in the Siegel Reader. Students just really gravitate to Baldwin. And I think his voice is just as important today as it was when he was writing, say, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We're also going to read a Shakespeare play, Henry V. Henry V is epic. Henry V is a play about war. It's a play about rhetoric. And it's a play about power. And it's a great play. And I know that Shakespeare might seem intimidating to some students, especially online. But over the course of the last 2 years being online, I've really made the lesson plan accessible for students. They start to really kind of understand how rhetoric and argument works. And it's a great play, so it'll all work out. I know it may seem like we have a lot of reading. Just have trust, because it does work out. English 1C is a class that's too much fun. We really can't screw it up. And I know that we won't meet in regular Zoom sessions, right? We're never going to meet on a Zoom session. However, I do have Zoom office hours. I'll record lectures like this. So if you need anything from me, come by to my Zoom office hour, say hi. But I'm really excited for our class. This class is going to be loads of fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your ideas. And I'll start looking over and start grading week 1 as the essays or the discussion boards come in.